The Book of Boba Fett makes use of a fun storytelling trick to increase the mystery and tension of its episodes, and you probably haven't noticed it at all. Spoilers for episodes 1 and 2 below. I've been enjoying the Book of Boba Fett. In case you're not aware, this is the latest of Disney Plus's Star Wars shows, following projects like The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch, and like them, it's pretty good. Especially the second episode, which is the most recent one to have dropped as I'm writing this. And I noticed something while watching that I thought I'd share. It concerns the dual time frame of the show, and the way that the Book of Boba Fett ties the story of its protagonist's past in with the present day narrative, which drives much of the show. So in episode 2, Boba, the new self-appointed daimyo of Mos Espa, is chasing up some leads he's acquired after capturing the assassin from episode 1. He goes to see the mayor, which turns out to be a slightly more murdery time than most mayoral visits, and on the way home he bumps into the twins. These big, ugly, slug-looking hombres are related to Jabba the Hutt, the original big, yucky slug guy of Star Wars, and they're not happy that Boba has muscled in on what they consider to be Hutt turf. Needless to say, things get pretty tense. The slugs even wheel out Bizarro Chewbacca. Fennec gets her blaster ready and the piggies get their swords. You could cut the atmosphere of this scene with a knife. Fisticuffs seem inevitable. But before we get into what actually happens, let's talk about why we naturally expect an action sequence at this point in the episode. Because it's not just that the tension had been built up as the episode approached this confrontation by the slow building drumbeats of the twins' procession, the western standoff vibe of the scene, and the panic we'd just seen on the face of Garza Fwip. Jesus, Garza Fwip, who makes these names? Garza Fwip. Sounds like a Palestinian with a lisp. Sorry, getting off topic. The point I'm trying to make is that even though the episode itself tries to build tension for this scene, that's not the only reason we, the audience, expect things to go sideways during Boba's meeting with the Hutts. It's because of the conventions of the medium. As viewers, we see a lot of TV, and take in a lot of stories, and while we're often aware of the things we apprehend from TV, like storylines, characters, flashy special effects or jokes, there's an equal amount of stuff we absorb that we're not conscious of, like the way frame composition and editing works. For instance, if we see an establishing shot of an area or building, and then cut to a different closer shot, we've learned to automatically assume that this second shot is in the location established by the first. Likewise, we have certain assumptions about the structure of a television story, certain things we unconsciously expect. For a general example, we tend to be used to stories having a clear beginning, middle and end, setup and payoff. But for a more specific example, the example I'm interested in for this video, I want to bring up something you're probably aware of to a degree. The way modern action or action-adventure shows always have at least one big fight or climax or set piece in them. Think of The Mandalorian, or any of the Marvel Disney Plus shows, or The Witcher, or even most shows of a similar format. Even the more contemplative episodes amongst these shows' runs have a pulse-raising scene or two, like that Mandalorian episode where Metal Daddy carries Frog Lady's eggs around. There's that chase scene with all the spiders. There's always something like this. After all, people are watching these shows in part because they want action. And the same is true for the Book of Boba Fett. In episode 1 it was the shootout in the street and the following parkour chase. So when we get to this moment, this ultra tense standoff in episode 2, we're naturally primed to anticipate a big explosive set piece, and then it doesn't come. Tensions de-escalate, the twins and cut-rate Chewbacca all depart, leaving Boba with nothing but a warning. There's no big shoot-up and Boba returns home, and the majority of the episode's remainder is taken up with the resumption of the flashback storyline we saw in episode 1, the tale of Boba's escape from the sand pit, and life with the Tusken people. It's in this storyline that we get this episode's action set piece, a thrilling sequence in which Boba and his tribal friends raid a train. Very cool, very reminiscent of classic Western cinema, but for the purposes of this video, I'm only interested in this sequence because it fulfills the episode's action quota, instead of the abortive shootout we saw earlier. Before going into episode 2, we didn't know if it was going to resume the flashback storyline. After episode 1, I think most of us assumed the Tusken Raider story would be continued at some point, but we had no way of knowing that episode 2 would continue it in a substantial way. The show could easily have ignored this storyline for a couple of episodes, or concluded it entirely in a later one. So when we saw Boba, Fennec, the twins, and Goth Chewbacca squaring up in Mos Espa, we had no reason to suspect that the guaranteed action quotient of this episode was going to happen in a different strand of the show's narrative. Remember, this episode had built up the tension to near boiling point, but it's able to dodge our subconscious expectations and cool things off because it has that train scene ready in reserve instead. So because the narrative shape of this series was an unknown quantity prior to this episode and its continuation of the flashback story, the Book of Boba Fett was able to deliver a second episode which kept the viewer totally in the dark and played our own genre expectations against us. But here's the trick, going forward we get this every episode. Now that we know the flashback storyline will be ongoing, we have something of a two-pronged narrative on our hands. It doesn't matter that we're already expecting a big action scene every episode, because we've no way of knowing which half of the narrative the action will be in. So next time we have a moment where tensions seem high and guns are drawn, even a sophisticated understanding of action television and its conventions and tropes won't be able to help us out. We won't be able to call any of these story beats until they happen, because at every moment, the show could repeat this trick and save its big punch-up for a flashback segment. The end result is that, like Boba, like Fennec, in tense standoff moments, we'll never truly know if an assassin or a droid or a Wookiee is actually gonna pull that trigger until it happens or it doesn't. And that's it. That's the fun little narrative trick the Book of Boba Fett's pulled. It's pretty simple really, but by intermixing past and present, Fabula and Suzyut, this little Star Wars project becomes a show hyper-conscious of the expectations for its own medium, and one willing to exploit those to keep its viewers guessing just when that action sequence is gonna come. And if you hadn't noticed it until now, I hope you found this video illuminating, and maybe even fun. If not, I'm planning to come out with a longer, more serious analysis of this show, and the dynamics of empire and colonialism at play on Tatooine. So if that sounds like a good time, consider subscribing so you don't miss it when it eventually drops. And also, I can't apologise enough for how weird my voice sounds. For the next few weeks I'll be missing a tooth, so speaking is hard, and currently a little painful, and I've got a denture, but trust me, you don't want me to record with that in. This is what I sound like when I'm wearing it. It's awful. But as always, I'd like to thank my patrons on screen for supporting me, especially Ian Fifield, and I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Cheers, see you soon.